Hello and welcome to today's YouTube live event on Smart Lessons Reporting and Engagement. My name is Quentin Fernandez and I'm going to be your host today, and we're going to go through how Smart Lessons and Smart Classrooms has the ability for you as a teacher to monitor not only whether your students are getting your questions correct or incorrect, but also to find out whether or not they're actually actively engaging with your lesson. So let's jump in and have a look. Okay, so the first thing we need to do is we need to open up our lesson. So I'm going to go ahead to my items, and I'm going to find the lesson that I'm going to be teaching. Now the system presents three different modes that we can enter into. This second and the third mode is going to give you the access to the results reporting and the audience engagement reporting. Edit is going to give you the additional benefit that we can make changes on the fly. The teaching mode is the one that we're going to enter into because we're going to be teaching this particular lesson in a class. It focuses the screens on all of our teaching materials. So all of our videos, our worksheets, our websites, that's going to be the primary view. Now the first thing we're going to have a look at when we're in the lesson is how do we know that our students are actually engaged with our lesson? Now we do all of this by clicking on the action panel. Now under the action panel, we have a button here called Show Audience. So when we walk into a lesson and we say to the students that are all on their own BYOD devices or their school given devices, we give them a couple of minutes at the beginning of the class to access the lesson, whether we've sent them a URL or we've posted it to the learning management system, or we've sent them to the SmartSuite OPAC and said do a search for how do magnets work and click on the lesson. Once we've done the role, we want to find out who has actually signed in and are ready to go. Okay, so to do that, we click on Action Panel and we click Show Audiences. Now, every student that has signed into our lesson is going to be given a card. Now, if their card is green, it's telling us that they're currently online and are engaging with our lesson. If their card is red, it's telling us that they either haven't logged in, or if we're continuing with the lesson and half an hour later, we suspect that one of our students have logged out of the lesson or have opened a new browser and are looking at Facebook or something that they're not meant to be looking at. When we come back to the audience panel, we can see that their card is now red, telling us that they're no longer engaging. Now, if that is the case and the student is struggling to sign in, or they were able to sign in but they're now mucking about on their computer, we have the ability to close the lesson for that individual. So we can click close. That student is no longer able to interact with the lesson. They won't be able to open it up. They won't be able to navigate through or submit any answers online. And then what we can do is we can come over here and click Print Paper. Now, all those questions that we formatted on the online platform are then printed out on this nice table with a little spot for them to put their answers with pen and a little spot for you to mark whether they got that answer correct or incorrect. So we can now print that piece of paper out, give it to that individual who wasn't able to log in because their computer was flat, or they're new to the school and they haven't yet got a SmartSuite account, or they were mucking about. You can continue on with the lesson, presenting all of the video content and the teaching material to those other individuals, as well as the individual with a piece of paper, and everyone can still interact with the lesson. So checking audience engagement is done by clicking the action panel and clicking Show Audience. Now, as we're moving on through our lesson and we're teaching the different topics that we're wanting to teach, we want to find out whether or not our students have grasped the concept. And we want to find out whether they are actually comprehending what we're trying to teach. So Smart Classrooms also has a built-in live reporting system. So let me just quickly flick over to my device here. And I'm going to submit some answers online. Okay, now in order for the results report to capture what the students have submitted, because they may want to select an answer, but they don't want to submit it as their final results. They want to go Now what that's going to do is it's going to pre-fill our dynamic results report. So if I now open that up, this is giving us a overall picture of what's going on in our class. So first of all, the audience status. So I can see that we have every single user who has been shared in on this lesson signed in. I've got one person who has completed and submitted their lesson. I've got 3 people that are currently in progress going through and answering the questions. 3 people in attendance because we booted one person out earlier because they weren't able to sign in. And we've got that ability to see that that one person has been kicked out and they didn't show up in the lesson. If I then scroll further on down, I can see question number 1, and I can see that 25% of my class are yet to submit an answer. I can see that 25% of the class got it incorrect, and I can also see that 50% got it correct. Okay, so we can see that in a pie graph and a bar chart, and then I can also see what my audience members submitted as their answers. So if I needed to refresh myself, I can see these are the answers that were submitted. The 50% selected the correct answer. The 25% selected they don't. They only attract a very short distance. Okay, now the reason why we've done this is so that as a teacher, we can have a look at the comprehension of the particular topic that we're teaching, so that if we needed to spend a little bit more time going over this topic with the class before we move on with the lesson, we have the data ready to go in front of us to make that decision. Now, every time our students are submitting answers and changing their answers online, this information here is rebuilding. And a lot of teachers, what they do is on the computer where they're projecting to the class the lesson, they are obviously teaching and showing the video content and the URLs that they're using to back up their teaching topic. On their mobile phone or iPads on the desk, they have the results report running. So you can have multiple devices signed in looking at the lesson with the same account. And that's going to give you the ability to either look at your your speaker's notes whilst you're going through and teaching that particular topic, or looking at the results report and finding out, okay, are the kids actually comprehending what I'm trying to teach here? If at the very, very end of our lesson, we say, okay, everyone has submitted their answers. We now need to capture what was submitted by the students for their portfolios. We can go back to our show audience. Okay, we can see that our 3 individuals have signed out and left the lesson. To make sure that they then don't go and change their answers, at the top here we can close the lesson for all audience members. Okay, and that means they're not going to be able to change the results at the end of the lesson whilst they're at home. And we can go ahead and click print results. Okay, now the same piece of paper that we saw earlier, which allowed that individual to submit their responses with pen, is now formatted to include the responses that each individual online submitted to the platform. So we can see that for Mary Jane Fernandez, she scored 60% out of 100 for this particular lesson. She answered D, which was incorrect. Next question was true, correct, B, correct, so on and so forth. As we scroll on down, we can see that Donald, who was our student that didn't attend, he was the student that we gave the piece of paper to. He got 0 out of 100 on the online platform. We can see our first generic user got 80%, and Rob Van Dyken got 80%. So again, we can print this off, and 1 piece of paper for each individual that joined our session. We can then stick that into their portfolio and use that at parent-teacher interviews if we needed to. So Smart Classrooms engagement reporting and audience reporting, very, very simple. It's all found within the action panel. You just need to decide whether I'm trying to find out whether the students are engaging, or whether I need to pull out that end result at the end of our lesson, or whether I'm wanting to look at the dynamic report to find out whether the students are actually comprehending our questions. Okay, so that's where you will find those 2 options. Now, if we find ourselves in the edit mode, okay, under the action panel, we have a few extra options, but those 2 functions are still found at the bottom of the screen. So it's not an issue if you do like to use edit mode to present your lesson. It gives you a little bit more control to do things on the fly, like add additional videos and content if your results report is showing that your students aren't comprehending the question. But for a simple view on the projector, the teaching mode has been designed to strip back a lot of the stuff that appears so that you and your students aren't getting distracted. So thank you very much for attending the Smart Classrooms Audience Engagement YouTube live event today. Again, my name is Quinton. I hope you got a lot out of that. Stay tuned because next week we're going to be covering even more information about Smart Classrooms. Thanks everyone.